Chairman Mao, Jamie Howe, Ho Chi Minh, Asif Din, Václav Havel, Graham Saville, No Surrender, Percy Fender, Guerilla Cricket.
Welcome to Guerillashire. I'm Tony Bishop at Tony Bishop1 on Twitter. Before we start, a reminder that Guerilla Cricket is currently partnering with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, JDRF, to support their fight to one day eradicate childhood type 1 diabetes. For every donation of £15 or more to Guerilla Cricket, we are donating 50% to JDRF. You can search Just Giving a Dick Well Abroad Appeal. All details, of course, are on our Twitter feed and website. And most importantly, thank you. Your support means a lot to us. It will mean a huge amount to them. Now, today, we are focusing on the mystical, twirling, whirling, floating and gripping world of spin bowling, and most particularly, the rich history of Indian spinners. My guest is Anindya Dutta, author of the book Wizards, The Story of Indian Spin Bowling, an essential read for all cricket lovers and admirers of spin, particularly, of course, Indian cricket. Anindya, a very warm welcome to Guerillashire.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's a pleasure being here.
We are delighted to have you. Now, let's find out a little bit about you. Banker by day, cricket writer by night. Tell us just a little bit of the story as to how you combine those two things.
Sure. That sounded like a good line when I when I wrote it originally, but it is true. I've been a banker for 26 plus years. I started writing on cricket a few years ago, on the history of cricket primarily, and you know it turned into something far more than I had thought. I started writing on an Australian website called The Roar, which is it's a fan writing medium, if you like. And then Kersi Meher-Homji, one of the great Australian cricket writers, wrote in to me to say that one of the articles that he had read, he thought there was a book in it. You know, it was a 500-word article, and I wrote back to him to say that I respect you a lot, Kersi, but turning a 500-page article into a book sounds like a lot. So, and then he said, well, you just need to have a plan, and I think you've got the thing in it to write, and that's how the journey started, really. And I started writing. I wrote a few books. I'd spend you know, evenings when I came back writing. Sometimes I'd wake up early in the morning to write. And during the day, of course, I had a 10 to 12 hour banking job on a trading floor. And that's how the banker by day, writer by night thing came. And then it's, you know, 4 books later, it sort of defines the way I used to write. But now I've just left banking. I've set out on my own entrepreneurial journey. I'm trying to combine. I've got a company in Singapore which is called Two Roads. You know, two roads which diverge in a wood. That's where it comes from. And I'm trying to combine my passion for sports, for cricket, with leadership and motivation. And I've got a few elite sports persons signed up with me to work with me on these. And I'm hoping that's going to be an interesting journey ahead. And of course, it allows me the time to write more.
Let's. I was going to say that you've got an impressive pedigree in cricket writing already. You've written a Gentleman's Game, Spellbinding Spells, We Are Invincible. Each cover sort of different aspects of our game. If you had to pick one, which one should I take to read on my desert island as well as Wizards?
Well, you know, Spellbinding Spells was actually the one which came out of that conversation with Kersi Meher-Homji. But if you were to push me to say that there could only be one book to accompany Wizards, I'd say pick We Are the Invincibles. And the reason for that is, you know, as one of the reviewers in the UK pointed out when I wrote that book, he said he loved the book, but I was a brave man to write it because I think he said it was the 14th book written on the tour or something like that. But I love that book because I am obsessed with that tour and how right after the Second World War, Bradman's last tour, how he went about the whole thing, the characters on that tour, the stories coming out of there. It was just completely fascinating to me. So when I told that story, it was really from the heart. And it's not a very thick book, but I think it's a very entertaining read, if I may say so myself.
Well, it's next. It'll be next on my reading list. You covered no less than I think 74 players in Wizards. I know because I counted them as I was doing a few notes on each one. So talk to us a little bit about you and spin bowling. Were you a spinner yourself?
I was not a very successful one, I have to say. I was a leg spinner, but I didn't have a googly in my arsenal. And there was nobody to teach me. So as you can imagine, life got a bit difficult after that. But it is what it is. And my favorite dismissal at that time was a stumping.
Right.
So I'd loved the fact that a batsman would miss the flight, miss the ball on the flight. And the one thing I could do was turn. The ball definitely had a rip on it. So the stumping was something which gave me a lot of joy. But it turned out I was a better writer than I was a spinner. So here we are.
Do you remember any one particular wicket that anybody famous or anyone that gave you more pleasure than others?
I'm afraid not. Just in one of the inter-school matches, one of the best player of the opposition team, I managed to fool him in the flight, and the ball spun a lot outside the off, and he was stumped. So that's something I always remember.
I remember facing Ray Bright once, the Australian off spinner.
Yeah.
Faced 3 or 4 balls. He didn't get me out. I was so relieved. I swung and missed an absolute dolly the other end. Lost my middle stump, but there we go. Okay, so now most people, I think, do associate India with spin bowling. Do you feel that the history of the art and artists in India had not been well covered before? Was there kind of a gap there? So, and how did you set out to sort of tackle things a bit differently in Wizards?
Yeah, it actually hadn't. There was one book written in the early 1990s, which, in my personal opinion, wasn't terribly well written, if I may say so.
Mm-hmm.
But what set me off was a book that Ramchandra Guha wrote called Spin and Other Turns. It's not one of his famous books, where it was maybe a 100-page book, in which on the chapter on spinners, not all of it was spinners as the name suggests, but one chapter was. And one of the things that he wrote was that I hope someday someone will write a real history of Indian spin bowling, right? And so when I read the other book, when I read this one, and it was a natural fit in a way in terms of my evolution as a writer, where I was confident of the research that I could do and get it right after having written 3 books. So I set out to write it chronologically, because for me, that's when you write the story of any sport. The chronological approach, I think, for a reader makes sense, because you don't switch back and forth too much across generations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I approached it. And what really was the case was that because there wasn't so much written history about the genre, I had to depend a lot on my friends at Cricket Archive for scoreboards. The Indian players, I would say 1990s and earlier, were extremely accommodative. They were very happy to speak, tell me stories, getting access to them through some journalist friends, because I'd never been a journalist, so I wasn't really within this sphere of influence, if you like. But they were very nice, and they gave me a lot of stories. I went back into quite a lot of the archives, newspaper archives, some older books which had been out of print. I acquired those books. And then I did, I must have spent 80% of the time on research and 20% in writing in the end.
Well, and it comes across, I think, when you read the book, it is definitely not a dry history of those magical 74 spinners. Well, some maybe not so magical, but what shines through, I think, as I read it, is it combines a depth of knowledge with a clearly underlying passion for the art of spin bowling and Indian spin, and that definitely comes through. Enthusiasm for the game and the art is kind of baked into every page. Now, one thing though that interests me, literally from more or less page 1, is that you're covering the history of the art of spin bowling and Indian spin bowling. So what's the most obvious thing for you to do to get to write the forward? Well, you don't do it, because you go straight to a fast bowler. and you get him to write the forward, and I thought, well, that's interesting. What was your thought process on that one?
Look, I mean, Kapil Dev is far more than a fast bowler as far as Indian cricket is concerned. He changed the trajectory of cricket in India with his whole approach, with the 1983 World Cup win, obviously, but also with his entire approach to the game, which was such a different approach from Sunil Gavaskar, being captain of the side before that, great batsman as he was, but fairly defensive as a captain. And then Kapil comes in, and he's like a breath of fresh air, right? He's going to take chances. So I think he, in that respect, is far more than just a fast bowler. But more importantly for me, because he had a long career, when he first started, he was playing with and against the quartet and a few other spinners who I talk about who didn't play for India. So Paddy Shivalkar, Rajinder Goyal, etc. And then under him, there were a lot of spinners who played right out to Anil Kumble, Maninder Singh. So he had actually been associated with 3 generations of spinners during his cricketing. So the perspective that he could give was quite unique. And when I had the conversations with him, when he wrote the foreword, I think it comes out in the foreword that he has a view.
He does, an expert one at that.
Yeah.
Did he, just out of interest, do you happen to know if he had a slower turning ball in his armoury, or I mean, a lot of good cricketers are good cricketers and can do a bit of everything. That us humble club cricketers could only dream of. He probably could rip a ball as well as a lot of club cricketers, I would bet, could Kapil Dev.
I'm sure. But he was primarily an outswing bowler, right? That was where his strength was. But he developed a lot of different variations during his career.
I love the way you mentioned the quartet there. And we are, I'm sure, going to be exploring them. But you're talking, I assume, of Bedi, Prasana, Chandra and Venkat, who have acquired, just a bit like the Beatles, the Fab Four. They were the Fab Four of Indian cricket through the 70s, I think, late 60s and 70s, right? And that wonderful first series win in the UK, sealed at the Oval. Now, there's a line
Actually, if I may interrupt you there, since we're talking about the quartet.
Sure.
In my view, the West Indian pace quartet wouldn't have existed but for the Indian spin quartet, in my view.
Now, that is a very interesting thought. To explain a little bit more about that.
Sure. If you go back to 1975, 76, and the Australia series where Thompson essentially made Clive Lloyd realize what fast bowling could do. And then we come to 1976, Bishop Bedi's team goes to the West Indies, and on a Port of Spain pitch which is taking spin, Lloyd declares and loses the match in the 4th innings. And what does he do from the next test onwards? He virtually never ever picks a spinner. And I think these two things combined brings in his pace quartet strategy in place. So in some ways, Tiger Pataudi bringing in the spin quartet strategy, saying that this is what my strength is. So why would I have pace bowlers on my side? Is replicated somehow, mirrored, if you like, by Lloyd, by saying, I don't need spin bowlers, I have pace bowlers.
Well, that's one of the other interesting things. This book has been written in a time when India is unusually rich in seam bowling talent.
Yeah.
If I think of the likes of Jasprit Bumrah, for example. But now there's a line from a conversation that you had with Australian cricket writer Mike Coward, and it really grabbed me, and I wanted to sort of have a little dig about it. What he said was, it's undeniable that ground pitch and weather conditions in India have traditionally suited the development of fast bowlers. But he says, so too, spin bowlers, yes, I beg your pardon, development of spin bowlers. But he says, so too has the Indian character, even in temper, patient, stoic, and respectful. What do you think he really meant by that? Because I can think patient, stoic, respectful. As an Australian, I'm not seeing Shane Warne when I hear those words. So what? So what is it? What is it that is there something about the Indian character as a nation that breeds spin bowlers, or is it just about the conditions?
I think it is about the character, not just the conditions. Well, I mean, Shane Warne would be Shane Warne because he's Aussie and there's no other way he could be. So whether he'd been a fast bowler, whether he'd been a spin bowler, Shane Warne would be Shane Warne. He couldn't behave any other way. Mm-hmm. But if you were to generalize, I think as a spin bowler, you need patience. You need to be always thinking. You need to be stoic because you're getting hit all over the place. You're bound to get hit all over the place, right? There's going to be a Vivian Richards out there who's going to try and hit you out of the attack, right? So if you're Bish and Bedi and you get depressed by that, it's never going to work. So I think there's no point in a spin bowler wasting their time and energy in arguing with the batsman, for example, or sledging. If you want to be a successful spin bowler, in my opinion, and this, I've spoken to a lot of spinners, right? And I think they agree more or less with this. Leave the aggression to the captain. So leave it to a Ganguly, leave it to a Virat Kohli, right? Yep. As a spinner yourself, if your style requires you, like for example, a Bedi or a Prasana, to somehow buy your wickets, then do that. Okay? Don't worry about it. You still need to flight. You still need to spin. And you need to prevail over the batsman. And I think that's somewhere, the story which I tell in Wizard, which I actually absolutely love. And this is a story that Ian Chappell told me about Prasanna and Gavin Robertson, the Aussie spinner. So Prasanna was brought to the nets by Ian Chappell on an Indian tour, and Gavin Robertson was there to get some tips from Prasanna, and he was listening to him absolutely rapt in attention when Prasanna was telling him about flight and being patient, etc. And then Robertson started to bowl, and then Prasanna stops him and he says that this is not an invitation to be hit into the boundary when you flight a ball, right? It's an invitation to loft it into the hands of a fielder. Words to that effect, right?
Yeah. It's kind of your attitude to life, isn't it? Is the glass half full or half empty? If you're a spinner, there's a man on the boundary. If you're the batsman, it's the guy in the crowd.
Exactly.
The question of which way you look at it.
That says a lot about how Indian spinners have looked at the art, and I think that's what Mike was referring to.
Now one of the things, I'm lucky enough doing what I do now, a bit like you really, gave up the day job and having far more fun. Whenever though one looks at history and particularly statistics around spinners and spin bowling and great performances. I mean, for any Englishman, you'll go back to Old Trafford in '56 and 19 wickets for Jim Laker and stuff like that. But there's always that inevitable caveat that there was uncovered pitches, and then there was when they covered pitches, and it's almost like the two. You always have to put that rider onto any discussion about great spin bowling and great spin bowlers' performances. Was it an uncovered pitch historically, or was it in sort of the modern day? Is that as true for Indian spin, or is that really less of a factor in India?
I think pitches have changed over the years, but it's a misconception that Indian pitches have always are spinning tracks, right? Of course, uncovered pitches, these days you don't have uncovered pitches, but even when you did, it was less of a factor in India because you were playing, at least international cricket and most of the cricket season, you were playing it in the winter. And it doesn't rain in the winter. So the impact of a sticky wicket, a drying pitch, it has always been a bit less. And contrary to popular belief, pitches in India have been flat tracks for a fair length of time over the decades. But because of the soil, the fourth and the fifth day have always taken spin. So I think that's something that first-class cricketers have always grown up with. So they know that if they're patient, they stay there with the game. The spin is going to come at the end when it will give that extra impact to their bowling. But until then, the quality of their bowling needs to be good enough for them to last. So I think that's
There's that kind of that's right. I was going to say there's the sort of certainly the English view quite often is what's the spinner's role? I'm thinking 5-day test matches. What's the spinner's role in the first innings? It's often partnership breaking or containment. What's the spinner's role in the fourth innings? Ideally, if you've won the toss and you haven't done something daft like put the opposition in on a good track. What's the spinner's role in the fourth innings? It's about winning you the game. And it's almost like there's very two sides to what a spin bowler is asked to do. But I was just kind of interested as to whether that was more the case in the days of uncovered pitches and whether that applied to India. And it sounds as though, I think you're saying somewhat less so, because you have more consistency of weather, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's consistent. Weather is more consistent. The quality, honestly, I mean, if you look at, I've covered 74 spinners, right? And as you rightly say, not all of them are the same quality as the others, clearly. But you've got a very high percentage of very high quality spinners in there. And remember, this is the creme de la creme, right? So it's the guys who came into international prominence out of, a billion people. So of course, there is something special about them. And if you look at the famous bowling spells in India, I think it's quite interesting if you look at that. If you look at Jasu Patel's 9 wickets against Richie Benaud's team, that was on a terrible matting wicket. And I remember a comment by Richie Benaud which said, Jasu Patel, that day was too good for us. Now that says a lot.
I can hear his voice in my head as well when you say that. Anything Richie ever said, you hear. Someone says it to you and you hear his accent in your head. It's a cricket thing. You can't help it.
Exactly. And then you have the famous debut 16 wickets of Narendra Hirwani. And that was a diabolical pitch. The West Indies had no idea what to do with him, right? And he was in supreme form as a spinner that day. Of course, you have to be, even if the pitch is bad, right? Otherwise, you don't get a Headley Verity kind of 10 for 10 unless you are good as well. But then you look at a couple of other performances. You look at Kumble's 10 wickets against Pakistan in New Delhi. That wasn't a bad pitch at all. But it was a pitch which suited Kumble. So it was one of those, the flat pitches, some balls going through, some balls bouncing. So that suited him. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't a turning track or whatever. Subash Gupte's 9 wickets was the same. It was a good track. So it's a combination. I think it says a lot about the quality of spinners who are getting those. And even if there weren't uncovered pitches, would Jamaica had got 19 wickets without that? Maybe not. He was a great spinner. So
there was it being Manchester, some weather about. So,
of course.
But nonetheless, your point is brilliant.
Was in several spells only because it kept raining, right?
Yeah. Now something else. As I went through the book, and the early years, right from Palwankar Baloo, it was interesting that most of the players, the spinners that you talk about, were largely slow left arm with the odd leg break bowler. And it was later we have to get to Ghulum Ahmed before we get an off-break bowler. Was there any reason for this, or is it just the way the cookie crumbled and it just the way fate turned out?
I've discussed this with the older spinners, with Bishop Bedi, with Dilip Doshi, and people I've had an opportunity to spend some time with, and I think we're agreed on the fact that the leg spinners, and primarily they were leg spinners before Ghulam Ahmed came in. The leg spinners came in for a very good reason, because the tracks were very hard at that time. So the wrist spin was really the only way where you could have some impact on those tracks. And if you go back to the first class matches at that time, there were huge scores. There were really huge scores. So I think that's the reason for the leg spinners. Now, the left arm spinners was probably fate. I mean, you had Palwankar Baloo, an amazing story of a person who just comes from nowhere. From a social standpoint, he's not even allowed to sit and drink from the same tea set as the opposition, and yet he's paid extra money to come in and bowl because the opposition batsmen need to get better. And then he goes on to, be probably the best spinner India had in the early years. So I think that was fate. So Ghulam Ahmed, there was no one, because I think of the hard pitches, who was bowling leg spin, and maybe it wasn't an art very well known. And I suspect it was, English teams like Gilligan's team, which came in, before India got test status, where players first saw good off-spin bowlers. And that's probably where the skill was picked up from, and subsequently you had Ghulam and the rest come in.
Well, as much as I would love to go through literally every one of those 74, actually, and I have in reading them. So if you want to, for every one, I actually jotted down, key figures and statistics and stuff like that, just in case they popped up. But what I think I wanted to do was to set you, Anindya, a little bit of a challenge. And now you've done the book primarily chronologically. So to make things more interesting, what I wanted to do was to have you to select 4 spinners across the entire history of India's spin in cricket. And you can have whoever you like, regardless of era. But one thing we'd work on the assumption that those from the early days would flourish today in modern formats, and with all the advantages that modern players have. Because actually there's a section in the book which I found really fascinating, was the impact of T20 and how the art of spin bowling has almost evolved to sort of combine that attack and defence in a very contained format. And then one further refinement is your 4 spinners will be selected for a home series in India against England, the current England team. So you've got to think about who's going to be bowling at who. Ben Stokes is there, just wielding that big left-handed bat of his. You're going to have one series at home, and you're going to have one series away. Just to be fair, it's going to be away in England. It's not going to be an early April viper's nest of a green seamer. So we're going to let you play in August. So there's a bit of sunshine, a bit of English sunshine will have filtered down onto the pitch. You've got a home series in India, you've got an away series in the UK. You're playing against the current England team, and you can pick from a wonderful canvas of 74 incredible spinners. So let's set you off on that little task. Where do you start?
Okay, that's a tough one. But the starting point, I think is easy as far as I'm concerned. Let's go with the home team first, right? That's the easier one, if you like, or maybe the more difficult one, because a lot of spinners know how to bowl in home conditions. The first person I would put in my team, in fact, if it wasn't England, which came in the second part, he would be in that as well. But definitely leading the spin bowling of my home team would be Subash Gupte. From all accounts, I haven't had the good fortune to see him bowl, but from every account that I've read, every one of his colleagues who I've interviewed, he was the most amazing leg spin bowler probably of all time. Gary Sobers more than once has said that he considers Subash Gupte to be a better spinner than Shane Warne, better leg spinner than Shane Warne.
Wow.
I remember another Sobers comment about Gupte, where he said he didn't take a lot of wickets, but he took a lot of good wickets. And when Gary Sobers says that about someone, and in the same breath, he says that he did things which even today I cannot believe. You have to think that the man was something special. Your readers can read the book to see why he had a very short career, thanks to the Indian administrators. He just gave up and went away to the West Indies. He went and settled there in Trinidad, had a very short career. He was at the top of the world just before that. So Subash Gupte would definitely be my first pick. Second, Bishan Singh Bedi. I mean, Bishan Bedi would walk in any team as a spinner, in any age.
And there is, of course, a link to English county cricket, because he made
Absolutely.
a number of years with huge distinction for Northants, where he is, I'm sure, still revered.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate the way his county career ended after that Vaislin episode in India, where he stood up.
Bringing an artificial substance to the ball is very much now a highly topical discussion, as we're no longer allowed to spit or sweat on it to make it swing and seam.
Exactly. I mean, what would they say to Lever? He would walk into the team, right?
Vaseline, not sandpaper.
Yeah. So Bishan Bedi, I mean, I'm just the first spinner I ever saw bowling was Bishan Bedi. I was 7 years old, gone with my father to watch my first cricket test match against the West Indies in Calcutta, Eden Gardens. And this whole thing of watching Bedi come in between the umpire and the stumps with his beautiful left arm action. Batsmen just didn't know what to do with his flight because they couldn't read him. Although it just seemed so deceptive. And he was just an amazing bowler. So Bishan Bedi would walk in.
I remember extraordinary grace about Bishan Bedi. There was a fluidity and just a stylish simplicity in his action that I remember from my childhood, certainly.
Yeah, that's how he was perfectly side on, right? It was just completely fluid, the whole action. Which is why, I think the batsman didn't know that the angle was changing. The length was changing, whether he was bowling the arm ball, they had absolutely no idea because it just looked the same, which was his greatness. And then there would be Rapalli Prasanna, who, if you like, was the mirror image of Bishan Bedi in a way, right? From a flight perspective, from the ability to fool a batsman. You had Ian Chappell telling me a few times in our conversation that when Prasanna bowled to him, it was like the ball was on a little string, and it would never get to where he thought it would. So when you have a bowler like that in your team, you have to pick him, right? Whatever the condition.
Wasn't it Ian Chappell? I think there's a line in the book where Ian Chappell said one of the great joys of my cricketing life was to play against Praz.
Absolutely. I think
He's
they
clearly
were
a fan.
They were great rivals and great friends. They became great friends just because of respect for each other. And finally, I have to pick Anil Kumble, right? On an Indian pitch, you don't know how the pitch is going to behave. Maybe it's just going to be a flat track. Maybe it's going to be a turner. It doesn't matter because you've got Anil Kumble in there, and he's going to be out there all day long trying to get his wickets, right? And you know that if you want to break through at some point in time, he's going to get it for you. Such a lion-hearted bowler. So I would pick Anil Kumble as my fourth spinner for my home series.
And you'd mentioned Subash Gupta, who absolutely. I'm just looking at his bowling figures. Best of 10 of 9 for 102, average of under 30. I mean, that's in the right territory. But you also mentioned his career came to a slightly unfortunate end, and I read it, and it's one of the book is full of little quirky, not anecdotes, because this is more than an anecdote, but it just seems so absurd. As I recall, he was sharing a hotel room with somebody else in the West Indies. That somebody else, Gripal Singh, I think, that somebody else decided he liked the receptionist, so he decided to phone her up and ask her out. The receptionist took offence to this and complained, and poor old Subash Gupta carried the can because he didn't tell him not to, which sounds to me like the most fabricated way of engineering somebody out of a position. I mean, what was really going on there? Was there a reason for all of that?
I don't know. I think nobody knows exactly what went on there, and there are a couple of corroborated stories which say that Subash Gupte wasn't even in the room. He was actually playing cards in a teammate's room at a different part of the hotel. And famously, they were not even called to the inquiry. And famously, he was asked that, why didn't you stop him? And by that time, Subash Gupte was so disgusted with this that he said, because he was bigger than me. So, and then he was dropped from the West Indies tour, which was coming up, and Gupte had enough, and he was one of the best spinners in the world at that point in time. And he just said, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. He quit, moved to the West Indies. He'd already got married to a West Indian girl, and he spent his life there. So,
also, I guess his stats. I think he spent a lot of his career. He did particularly well against the West Indies, bowling against the 3Ws amongst others. So it was you always have to think about quality of opposition. You can ramp up as many stats as you like, but who were you bowling at? And in his case, there was no doubt there was some quality there. So for your Indian home game against a match against England, you've gone for Subash Gupta, Bishan Bedi, Prasana, and Anil Kumble. England are 150 for 4. Ben Stokes is now striding to the crease. Who do you think is going to be? Which of that quartet is the most likely to tempt, either beat his bat or tempt him into something injudicious? Do you think?
Prasana would be my guess.
Okay. You've clearly got a favourite. Am I thinking you've maybe got a favourite amongst the 4?
No, it's because you're talking about a left-hander, right. And you've got an off-spinner of the class of Prasana, who left-handers I don't think particularly enjoy playing. So probably you'd have Prasana and you'd have Subash Gupte from the other side, because Gupte had 2 different googlies in addition to his leggy.
Yeah.
So the combination of these 2 might just have proved too much for a modern batsman, let's say.
Okay, and I'm going to throw you a cheeky question, just to
Sure.
because there's 74 potential players in there, and it's such a delightful read. one of your players just before the game comes up to you and says, "I've got a dodgy hammy. I don't think I can make it." Who's your fifth man? who are you going to phone up the night before the game?
Well, it depends. It depends who it is.
All right, then you've lost. You've lost Prasana. Nightmare.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That is a very tough one. Because honestly, the quality of spinners, India's probably had less great off spinners in that way than that thing. I don't know. I'd probably bring in. I may not even bring in an off spinner actually into that team to replace Prasanna. I might just bring in Dilip Doshi.
Interesting one.
In there. Because I think he took a lot of, again, like Gupte, which a point that you just made, that he bowled to some very good batsmen. Something that I did some research on later after writing the book actually was that if you look at the wickets that Dilip Doshi took in his career, about 90% of them are number 7 and above. Yeah. He rarely had the chance to bowl at tailenders. Now, whether that was his captain not, requiring his services, not wanting him to bowl, whatever it was. So you want someone like that who's capable of taking the wickets of the top order batsmen. So even with Bedi in there, and India's had many instances of 2 left arm spinners bowling together. So I don't see a problem with Bedi and Doshi being in that team.
But also, you're playing England, and
exactly.
I think his best bowling was against England at Old Trafford, where he got 6, I think, for 102. So he might, maybe he'll make your team to play in England. I don't know. On that day, just out of interest, he got rid of Jeff Cook, Chris Tavares, Derek Randall, Jeff Miller, Derek Pringle, and Bob Willis. Just so you know. Okay. So there's his 6 Englishmen accounted for. Also, taking us back to county cricket, played, of course, with a distinction for Notts, I think, for about 5 years, and then with Warwickshire for 2 or 3. So you have your 4. You have Subash Gupte, Bishan Bedi, Prasana, Anil Kumble, and we've snuck in a cheeky Dilip Doshi just in case. That's for your home game on Indian wickets. You've now got to come and play at, I don't know, Edgbaston.
Okay.
Takes a bit of turn.
Yeah.
Who is going to take on the modern England team from your magical 74, or some less magical?
Well, I was hoping you'd give me the oval, but
all right, okay. You can have the oval. You can have the oval. I'll be fair. The oval it is.
Okay. So of course I asked that for a reason, because if you have the oval, then you've got to have Bhagwat Chandrasekhar, right?
Yes.
I mean, what was it? It was called the bowling spell of the century, right? I think that's what Wisden called it. The 6 for 38, 1971 oval. India waited from 1932. And after 39 years, won a test series in England, and it was because of one man. It was one spell from Bhagwat Chandrasekhar. He was just such an amazing bowler, such a difficult man to face on any pitch. I remember a story where Viv Richards turns back to Kirmani and says, "Is he a spin bowler or is he Tomo?" Because he's had just this ball going past his nose, right, at speed, and he was quite unpredictable. So I would pick Chandra definitely for an England appearance.
I'm glad you said that, because we have a shared love of his art, which I actually got to write about once, just before the 2018 series. I did a bit of a study of that game at the Oval, and he took 2 wickets just before lunch. And he took 2 in the first wicket, first innings, I think, D'Oliveira and Illingworth. And then he got Brian Luckhurst, John Edrich, Keith Fletcher, Ray Illingworth, John Snow, and John Price in the second. So 6 for, I can't remember what his teammates, I believe, used to call him Mill Reef.
Mill Reef.
Or he called his faster ball Mill Reef,
Yeah,
because that was the Derby winner that
that's
year.
right.
And his quicker ball, by all accounts, was pretty nippy. And just to overcome the difficulties of that early illness that left him with the kind of misshapen arm. There's just so much mysticism around him that just fascinated me. So I'm delighted he's made your team.
Yeah.
Who else have we got?
Well, we've got Bish and Bedi.
Okay.
There is no way you can leave him out in there with all his county experience, and you've got Guerillashire in there. So
Okay.
he was originally in that team, and I think very few players have had the kind of success that they had in English county cricket. Others have had smaller, shorter stints, but not with the same amount of success. And then you've got Prasana. So very similar team, other than the fact that Chandra replaces Gupte, and Doshi replaces Kumble. You had two leg spinners in India, which is sort of consistent with what we spoke about earlier with the harder pitches, etc. And here you've got on softer English pitches, you've got just Chandra.
And no Venkat? How would you break
No
the sad
Venkat.
news to him? Or why? What would be your reason to explain to him how he didn't make that cut?
Well, if you've got two off spinners, and I think very honestly, and I think it probably, I've tried to be as fair as possible, but in my analysis, it comes out fairly obvious that in terms of quality of spin, Prasanna was a cut ahead, a cut above Venkat, and Venkat was a very good off spinner, but he was a good off spinner with a leg cutter, which was quite unique. But he didn't have, probably because of his height as well, he didn't have the kind of flight, and because of that, I think he didn't have that loop and the ability to make the ball hang back, which Prasanna did. So for me, whenever there is a choice between the two, Prasanna always walks into the team, unless there is a very specific reason for having Venkat.
Okay. Now we talked about playing in England. Many counties for many years would have West Indian cricketers, batsmen and bowlers. People like Clive Lloyd, who of course became permanent fixtures at the counties that they played at. South Africans, of course. Certainly, we talked about Bish and Bedi, and there have been others, but it's been less common for Indian spinners to sort of make counties their regular home in history. Some have come and gone. I mean, I have a very soft spot for Murali Kartik because he helped Middlesex win their one and only T20 title. And he and Sean Udall were. You're just breaking up a wee bit.
Sorry, I was saying that Murali Kartik is a wonderful classical spinner, and it's for me, it's one of the regrets of Indian spin bowling, the history of Indian spin bowling, that Kartik did not have more chances and more success than he did among his generation. I mean, I look around and I cannot think of a person who actually was a better finger spinner than him, left or right.
Well, he ticked those two boxes for me, just as a Middlesex fan, because he of both containment and attack. And I think between he and Sean Udall, one took 1 for 18 in the semi-final on finals day, the other took none for 18. But they were the spin twins that strangled every team pretty much that Middlesex played up to and including finals day. They were just terrific together. But the point I was going to come on to was, it's less common, I think, for Indian spinners to make English county cricket their home. Is that just a general feeling? Is there a reason for that beyond that English wickets can be a little bit less friendly? Why do you think so many other nations have sent players and yet less so Indian spinners historically speaking?
Well, Indian spinners started playing for counties regularly, I guess, from Vinoo Mankad, and Vinoo Mankad used to play the Lancashire League, and he was probably the first true professional in that sense. But you're right. There other than Bishan Bedi, Dilip Doshi, I can't actually, and Karthik obviously, who's had some great stints. I can't name too many other spinners Indian spinners who've had long stints at counties, and I don't know the reason for that. It could well be that counties themselves may not have wanted too many foreign spinners. They might have thought that local spinners would exploit the local conditions better. It could be that, because it's never come across in a conversation with Indian spinners that it's been a case of the spinners not wanting to go there and play. I could be wrong, but I would make that assumption rather than Indian spinners not feeling that they would be up to it if they went there.
I mean, you mentioned a couple. Ravi Shastri, I think, had a pretty decent spell at Glamorgan. Murali Kartik, you've talked about. Bishan Bedi. Anil Kumble played for Surrey, Leicester and Northants, but I think, if I'm right, mainly in sort of one-season spells.
Yeah, Ashwin had a couple of seasons as well, and he was supposed to be there this summer, but obviously this summer nothing's worked out.
And Harvey at Surrey, but again, I think just for a season from sort of recollection. So, okay, no specific reason there. So let's come on to, if we may, the current crop of spinners in India. I mean, at the moment, as I said earlier on, I think, interestingly, India is quite rich in seam bowling with Bhuvi Kumar, Bumrah, Pandya, Sharma, Shami. They've got a seam attack that many countries would be very, very happy to have. But there is something very exciting about Yuzvendra Chahal and Kuldeep bowling in tandem. Not to mention Ashwin. They appear at the end of the book, obviously chronologically, almost as though it's like you're teeing up the next version, volume 2. Do you think they've got it in them to become as legendary as say the Fab Four or the quartet?
Well, if I stop being chronological about it, and we speak about Kuldeep to begin with, I'm a huge fan of Kuldeep. I just think their first having a good Chinaman bowler is you don't find one every day. He is special in the sense that although he's grown up in the T20 format and come out of there, he is unafraid of being hit as a spinner, which is so different and so unlike any other T20 spin bowler. Even you have someone like Rashid Khan, right, who's enormously impactful. And you put Rashid Khan in a test match. They haven't had too many, but if you look at the test matches he had, he struggled. He's really struggled against good teams. I think the reason is that because they have 4 overs to bowl and they can't afford to give away too many runs, and they don't have the time to be too inventive about what they're doing. The whole mentality is don't take risks.
Yeah.
Whereas you have a Kuldeep in there who's in a T20 and he's flighting the ball, right? So he, I think, has the essential element in there of being a really good spin bowler. The problem today is that I think the captains in T20, in ODIs, in test matches, and in many cases they're the same, carry that mentality that they don't want their bowlers to be hit.
Yeah.
This restricts the spinners in a way. the other thing is you have these huge coaching staff of each team, right? So you have spin bowler, you have bowling coaches, whatever. And they seem to have this peculiar thing about not letting bowlers bowl too many overs at the nets, which is just bizarre. Because as a spinner, I can understand that maybe for a fast bowler because of, you don't want them injured. As a spinner, you've got to bowl 30, 40, 50 overs in practice if you want to be a test spinner. And spinners today are not allowed to do that. So if you look at Kuldeep, he has a problem with his shoulders. They're not strong enough. So when you put him in a 5-day match, after a while, even with his intent, he struggles a bit.
Bit like Adil Rashid from an English perspective.
Exactly, which is why, Rashid is very, very clear. He doesn't want to play test, and then he comes and he takes the Virat Kohli wicket, and he's the greatest leg spinner England's ever seen. So, anyway, that we won't go there. So I think Kuldeep, if he gets out of that, has the potential to be a really top-class spinner across formats. Chahal is a very, very smart bowler. He's one of the smartest bowlers I've seen in modern cricket, and he was a chess prodigy. He was a FIDE-rated chess player, and it shows in how he bowls. His problem is he doesn't get to play first-class cricket. He doesn't get to play first-class cricket because his captain in his state side is a leg spinner. So he doesn't get into the red ball team of his local state side. So he can't play in the domestic cricket. So he's ignored. And it's fun with these guys. Everybody's on social media, right? So you see the interactions where he sometimes sends out a tweet to Virat Kohli, cleverly suggesting that maybe he can make it to the test team, right?
That's quite funny. That's funny. Well, now you mentioned Test cricket. Let's come on to just a couple of general questions about cricket, but from from your perspective, people talk. Test cricket's dying. I keep hearing that's been dying for over 100 years, and still going. Not at the moment, sadly, but and discussions around 4-day tests. Do you think that makes sense for any reason at all?
Well, you're talking to a person who's just written about 74 spinners, right?
Yeah.
I think my answer.
That's why I thought you'd give me the answer.
If you don't have 5 days, you're essentially taking a huge weapon out of your armory and throwing it away, the spin bowler.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what pitch it is going to wear. It is going to have some wear and tear. It can be in Australia, it can be in England, it can be anywhere in the world. If you don't have that weapon on the last, couple of days, the chances of it being an interesting match are far less. And then if you look at the last England test, right? I think it was the last test before all this happened, or one of the last tests. If you didn't have that 5th day, you wouldn't have had that magnificent test match, right?
Oh, yeah. Are you thinking Headingley? Yes. No, that was the penultimate test of the series. Yeah, before the Oval. Your ground, your favourite ground. What I'm guessing is your favourite English ground, the Oval.
Completely. And I lived in Surrey, so
there you are.
Of course. So I think the 5th day is an essential part. Of course, Test cricket's being gone from 3 days to 6 days in its history, right? But I think the 5-day format works very well. Why would you want to cut down 1 day? How is that going to help the cricket calendar? I'm just completely unable to understand this. That are you going to spend that 1 extra day of every test match having yet another T20, which nobody cares about because they cannot? No, I won't say nobody cares about. People do care about it, but they do not remember it, right? So whether you have 500 T20s in a year, or whether you have 535 T20s in a year, is not going to make the world of difference to anyone in the world. Right. However, the difference between having the 5th day and not having the 5th day is probably a memorable test match which you would remember for the next 20 years.
Absolutely. Well, I think that we're going to sort of run out of time here. What I'd like to do, I don't know if I can see. Oh, of course, I've got the backdrop, so showing the book is completely useless. But we are talking about Wizards, the story of Indian spin bowling. It's written by the eloquent gentleman and knowledgeable gentleman I've just been talking to, Anindya Dutta. It covers the whole history of Indian spin bowling from Palwankar Baloo through to Messrs. Yuzvendra, to the likes of Yuzvendra Chahal. It is rich in insight, rich in knowledge, and just breathes a passion for the art of spin bowling and Indian spin bowling. And India, thank you so much for being my guest on Guerillashire today. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you so much, Tony, for having me. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you, and I hope people enjoy visits.
Indeed. Well, you can find it, of course, on Amazon and at all good bookstores, as indeed you can with Anindya's other work. Just before we go, needless to say, just a reminder, if you're a patron for Guerilla Cricket, you can get this podcast first before other folks, along with a number of other benefits. And to remind you that particularly at the moment during these difficult times, we've partnered with JDRF. So if you kindly donate £15 to the Just Giving Dick Weller Broad appeal page, for any £15 you donate, 50% will be given to support the incredible work of the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and we thank you for that. This podcast will, of course, be available on all usual channels, Podbean, iTunes, and others, as well as, of course, on our website, Twitter feed, and other ways that you can find us. For now, that is us. We have dived deep into the history of India spin with Anindya Dutta. We look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care of yourselves, and thank you very much indeed for your company. We will speak on Guerillashire again soon. Take care.
From Gloucestershire to Leicestershire, up into the stratosphere.